I'm Amber Harper from the Burned In Teacher Podcast and a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Coming up on episode 154 of the House of EdTech podcast, it is time for the 2020 House of EdTech Final Four. I've got 2 House of EdTech VIPs, and I'm going to let you know what I've been up to. Strike up the band. Welcome to the House of EdTech podcast. I am your host, Chris Nesi. The House of EdTech explores how technology is changing the way teachers teach and the impact that technology is having in education. I discuss technology that is changing our classrooms and schools, and I share tools and tips that you can hear today and use tomorrow. You're going to hear the stories of teachers, leaders, and creators just like you. The purpose? Whether you use it or not, technology is changing the way you teach and how your students learn. Hello, hello, hello. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Thank you for listening to the House of EdTech and making me a part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. We've done it. We made it. We have reached the 2020 House of EdTech Final Four. This is one of my favorite episodes that I do on an annual basis, and this started way back in 2014 when the podcast first launched back in 2014. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Voting has been going on throughout the month of March, and I'm going to announce the Final Four, and we're going to kind of talk about who I think would be the winner of said bracket, and we're going to have a little fun. I've got, again, 2 House of EdTech VIPs, because it's been a few episodes since I did VIPs, just because I just didn't include it. But, you know, it's my podcast, and I will do what I want to do. The EdTech Thought is going to be interesting and fun today. And just a couple of announcements here at the top of the episode. You know, we're here. It's April 2020. And, you know, things are still crazy here in the United States and in many places around the world. And I just want to take this moment to just say, I hope that you're doing well. I hope that things are going well for you. I hope that nobody in your immediate circles is facing any medical issues. I hope that whatever you're doing for education, I hope that it is going successfully. And I would love to hear from you. I know that with social distancing, and for many of you and me, you know, we're isolated. And I just want to let you know that I'm here for you, you know, whether it's Flipgrid or Twitter or Instagram, you know, chrisnessy.com/feedback. Just say hello. I would love to hear from you. And again, I hope that you are doing well. I know on some podcasts, you know, you hear a lot of, you know, where am I going and what am I doing and where am I appearing? And for the most part, I don't get to go anywhere or speak anywhere or, you know, get to do anything that a lot of other people get to do. But being a podcaster, I do have an upcoming podcast appearance that you might be interested in checking out. A good friend of mine, Jim Collison from theaverageguy.tv is his website. He hosts a podcast called Home Gadget Geeks. And I've been on his show a couple of times previously in the last few years, and I've even dropped those episodes into my feed as bonus episodes. And his podcast is all about, you know, gadgets and technology at home. And he's asked me to be on a roundtable about how teachers like you and me, how we are getting along with technology and what's going on in education in our current state of affairs. So I'm going to be appearing on Home Gadget Geeks on Thursday, April 30th, and Jim does his podcast live. He live streams it. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I will include a link to his podcast website in the show notes for this episode out at chrisnessy.com/154. And if you can come out, great. If you want to subscribe to Jim's podcast, Home Gadget Geeks, that would be cool too. It's a fantastic, fun show, especially if you like to use technology in your home. He's very knowledgeable, and his guests are knowledgeable, which is, I guess, why he wants to have me on to talk about, technology in school and doing that at home. So Home Gadget Geeks, Thursday, April 30th, live at 9 p.m. Eastern, and I will be sharing that link throughout the month of April. Hope you can come and check it out. So for this episode's EdTech Thought, I don't have any notes prepared, and I just wanted to speak off the top of my head about the fact that, man, these are crazy times. And I started to get into this just a few minutes ago at the very top of the episode about, you being well and, taking care of yourself and, being mindful. And I know that, at least for me, I've got a lot going on. I've got my two kids at home, Miles and Colton. So my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old doing pre-K, doing second grade. I've got my high school classes. I've got 6 classes of high school world history that I'm teaching this year, which is, nothing out of the ordinary. Every year I teach 6 classes, but that's all online and at home. And I've got my 3 Rutgers classes, which Rutgers is completely online and completely remote learning since the middle of March. Yeah, somewhere in there. And, I don't know about you, but I feel busy. I still feel productive, and I still feel like I'm doing a good job. Attendance and participation isn't what I would like it to be for what I'm doing at the high school, but I'm in a different situation, based on the community and the socioeconomic status of my students. I do get kids that are participating, but I also know that I have a lot of students dealing with a lot of hardship, and there are many challenges that my students face and students in my school community. I'm very fortunate to be an educator and be home and support my own children. My wife is also an educator, and we are fortunate enough to be able to work together and understand education and be able to work with both of my children on everything. Thank goodness for Class Dojo. And obviously they're not sponsoring this episode, but Class Dojo, I haven't explored that in quite some time. Probably not since I had Jenna Klein on a previous episode of the podcast. And Class Dojo has changed so much since that episode. Class Dojo is like a little learning management system. My kids, they can log into Class Dojo, whether it's on a computer or on my phone or my wife's phone, and they can post work, they can write on there, and kind of like a portfolio, and there's just so much going on. And, thank goodness for that. But, I also realize that there are a lot of parents out there and families that they are not educators. They don't know what's going on. Now, I don't know that listening to this podcast would necessarily help them with that, but, I can only imagine what a lot of families are going through, especially, parents, if they're losing their jobs. I mean, there are so many families that have so many bigger issues than worrying about completing work for school. And that stress can certainly trickle down to, children and students that are out there. So I don't have the solution. These are just some things that have been, on my mind. I have a student at Rutgers who he's actually missing. You may have seen me tweet about this recently, but I've got a student who I saw in a virtual class meeting, just 2 weeks ago, and he went missing, left his home. Could be a medical issue, but he is missing. And, that's also weighing heavy on my mind and my heart. And, the other students in that class who have interacted with this individual, who is a fantastic young man with, so much potential and, a bright future based on, the things he's studying. And I don't share that, to bring you down, but if I'm dealing with, these types of things, you are also dealing with things that are weighing on your mind and your heart, good, bad, or indifferent. I typically get ready, for Easter, and, my family, we do a big brunch and an Easter egg hunt at my parents' house. And, I've got cousins that come over, and everything is just, turned upside down. And I don't know when this is going to end. I don't know what is going to happen, but I do know that there are going to be a lot of things in the world that are different. And sometimes when we think about things being different, many people get scared at change and they don't want change. They don't like change. I'm okay with change and things being different. I'm hopeful that it's productive change and we see effective and efficient change, especially in education, because that's what we are here, you and I, to talk about, on this particular podcast. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I hope that there are big things coming, and I hope that education takes a turn for the better. And this is a real opportunity in so many regards, not just with education, just to kind of hit reset on some things. I've been out in my neighborhood, in my community, and I have seen more people walking and riding their bikes than ever before. Typically there's this one gentleman who I see jog past my house, at least 4 to 5 days a week. And I'm seeing all types of people walk past and run past and ride past, the House of Ed Tech estate. But I don't know. I hope, again, I'll end this Ed Tech thought by just saying, I hope that you are doing well. And if you need to talk to anybody, or you want to share a success, or you've got questions about what you can do in your classroom, let me know. Go to chrisnessy.com/feedback. There's, Twitter, there's Instagram, there's Facebook. If you go to chrisnessy.com/Facebook, you can join the Facebook community. We can certainly have conversation there. I'm actually not debating. I just need to figure out when I can do some live streaming and just connect with people. So Facebook is going to be a place where I can do that. If you want to reach out on Voxer and talk, or if you want to reach out, you want to talk on the phone, I'll call you, or, something. We can video chat. We can Google Hangout. These are just times where let's just support who we can support and help who we can help. And we'll just make the best of everything. And that's all we can do. And that's my Ed Tech thought. All right, and it is time for the 2020 House of Ed Tech Final Four. March is over. The votes have been cast. And let me say this. There were over 200 total votes cast throughout the month of March. So I went back and I looked at other times where I had people participate in voting. And obviously, by far, you and the rest of the House of Ed Tech community, you all really came through big time with participating in the voting and sharing and, downloading the brackets that I was putting out on Facebook and Twitter. And that just made me feel good to know that I'm connecting with people like you and people are getting involved and participating, which certainly as a podcaster, that definitely puts fuel in my tank. So let's take a look. I mean, the House of Ed Tech Final Four. So after the month of March, we have narrowed it down to a Final Four of Flipgrid versus Book Creator and YouTube Live versus EdPuzzle. This year we had the 4 regions. We had the Create region, the Collaborate region, the Communicate region, and the Critical Thinking region. And out of the Create region, we had Flipgrid. Out of the Collaborate region, we had Book Creator. Out of the Communicate, we had YouTube Live. And out of the Critical Thinking region, we had EdPuzzle. Now, if you go to chrisnessy.com/final42020, and that's all lowercase letters and the numbers 2020, you can see the final bracket. And obviously the bracket is also in the show notes for this episode, but really good matchups. And I saw a lot of people on Twitter recently saying how some of these regions look like death matches. And I'll be honest, that's kind of by design, because I've seen some imitator EdTech tournaments over the last month, and the matchups in some of these other competitions, quote unquote, just didn't make any sense. Like I put actual, care, thought, rhyme, and reason. And, obviously I know that the popular tools are going to be the ones that make it through, when you're putting it out to basically a popularity contest and you're voting. But this was just intentional. Again, with the 4 regions, I tried to be, again, intentional about what I put where, and I try to match up similar tools. And yeah, I guess it's kind of like a popularity contest, but I was looking to see what are the tools that people are using. And I can't say for sure, but I think obviously current events here in the spring of 2020 may have had an impact on what people are doing and using. And, Flipgrid, certainly a valuable remote learning tool. EdPuzzle, a valuable remote learning tool. Book Creator, certainly you can use at a distance to have students creating content while they are not in school. And obviously YouTube Live, well, hey, it's YouTube and people like YouTube, and it's a very powerful tool to be able to live stream and connect when you can't be in the same place at the same time as your students. So in our final, again, we did the final four voting, and that ended on April 3rd. So we had our final four of Flipgrid versus Book Creator and YouTube Live versus EdPuzzle. And people like you who voted, we have our final matchup, which is Flipgrid versus EdPuzzle. Now, I did not open it up to a public vote of who is the ultimate winner. I will give you my thoughts on that in just a few minutes. But I figured I would go with these two tools, Flipgrid and EdPuzzle, and just talk about each one. And, obviously we're familiar with Flipgrid and EdPuzzle, but I want to make sure that I included here in this episode information about how we can actually use these tools in elementary school and also in high school. So why don't we start with Flipgrid? So here are some things that you can do with Flipgrid in an elementary classroom. All right. So number one, you could ask students to share a favorite book or story and get them talking about it and give their thoughts on it. You can ask questions or have general prompts about their reading, which could certainly be valuable even during current events of learning at a distance. A great way to get kids involved. Number two, you can invite students to hold up cards with mathematical problems written out and devote the narration of the video to describing the process that they use to solve a problem. This would actually be really good for my own son, who, in the way he's learning math, he's got to write down how he's getting the answers. And his favorite second grade answer is, my strategy is my brain. So certainly using something like Flipgrid and getting him to talk on video and really, really talk about how he's solving math problems would be helpful. Number three, you could ask students to choose a favorite plant or animal and describe it using all five of their senses. Number four, you could encourage students to connect how past events have led to present day events. And depending on the age group, you may also want to recommend episodes of a podcast like Throughline, where the hosts of that NPR podcast, they talk about a current day event and they trace it back to a historical time and they kind of connect the dots to the present day event. And real quick before I continue, if you haven't picked up on it, I'm trying to give you recommendations and things you can do with a tool like Flipgrid at the elementary level in a multitude of subject areas, because I know that with education technology, sometimes we think that certain tools could only be used effectively in one subject area. And certainly that is not the case with a tool like Flipgrid. Number five, you could ask students to combine as many different forms of media as possible by including things like music, art, and a dramatic presentation all in one video. And if you weren't aware, as of spring 2020, Flipgrid has added a great new, I don't want to say feature, but a great new ability to make videos longer than 5 minutes. And I believe the maximum on a Flipgrid video is now 10 minutes. So that's a real opportunity to have kids do something longer form. So maybe take advantage of that if you have kids working at a distance, or if you're listening to this well into the future, beyond the spring of 2020, hopefully you can have kids doing stuff for longer than 5 minutes. Next, you can encourage students to set a personal health goal and explain what they will do to achieve it, and perhaps even post videos about them doing it. So if you've got some physical education exercises, you could certainly model it, and you could kind of use Flipgrid as a phys ed portfolio where you can have kids basically posting their workouts or things they do for activities. Next, you could invite students to have conversations with props and illustrations in a world language that they are learning. So have them do skits or performances in the world language where they have to speak or maybe identify objects around their home or in their neighborhood. You could also ask students to explain the process by which they do a physical activity and the effects that being physically active have on other parts of their life. Now, if you really want to go above and beyond and really get kids connecting and speaking and using Flipgrid effectively, also consider having students evaluate their own work on a Flipgrid video by discussing what they would do differently if given the opportunity to repeat a project. I talk all the time with my high school students about being reflective and taking ownership of their education. And certainly, Flipgrid as a way to reflect certainly shows growth, because I know at least in high school, kids' looks change, so you're kind of documenting their own journey, and that's what any good content creator is going to do. They're going to document the journey. They are going to document the process. Now let's shift gears a little bit and continue to talk about Flipgrid, but some things that we can do at the secondary level. So let's say 8 through 12. So you can obviously do things like class introductions at the beginning of a year, maybe even before the school year starts if you have a way to connect or email your students and have them participate in a grid. You could do things like virtual career days or have science fairs. And I think the virtual event of any type is certainly going to be something cool where maybe you can get a community member to create a video that can be used as the prompt, and then invite that person to also see how your students respond and react to what's being posted. You could also bring on expert discussions. I saw recently through a Twitter and a YouTube account, I don't have it in front of me, but I will. If you go to the show notes at chrisnessy.com/154, I will link to this particular account. I think it's the Millers EDU on YouTube and Twitter. But on Flipgrid, you can actually post as the prompt where you can only like upload a YouTube video or a GIF. And yes, you know, I say GIF. You can post a YouTube live video on a Flipgrid, and you could have a guest come on and stream live, and your students could be responding and posting on Flipgrid while a speaker is kind of doing a live stream. Or if you found any type of live stream, you know, NASA does so many live streams. Maybe you do a science lesson and you embed a YouTube live stream from NASA and you have students discuss it. Or you find a YouTube live stream of something happening, you know, where it's watching a bird's nest. I don't know, but you can embed a YouTube live stream into a Flipgrid as the prompt, and you could build discussion around a live stream. You could also have students obviously reflect on their learning, talk about class news. Imagine the power of using Flipgrid for, say, a class council or student council, where kids can go and get updates and see their peers reporting on news about what's going on with different events and things. Maybe you're the media specialist in your school. You could do book reviews, host a book club, or if you're the English teacher, host book reviews using Flipgrid. Band teachers, consider using it to have students play. Maybe you could do a virtual orchestra, and hey, spring 2020, imagine the power of kids posting videos, and maybe you can sync that up as the band director. You pass that on to your video teacher. I'm looking at people like Bruce Reicher out there who can maybe edit together some of these clips on something like WeVideo. That would be super cool to see a virtual band or orchestra performance. End of year memories. Again, this year might not be the best year to look at end of year stuff, but let's say you have freshmen coming in and, you know, you have them report their goals and what they want to do, and then you bring that back when they're seniors or at the end of the year. Or maybe you're a tighter knit, you know, K through 12 district, and you get your kindergartners using something like Flipgrid, and somebody downloads all those videos and you save them all the way. So this is a long-term plan. You save them all the way to when those kindergartners get to 12th grade, and you pull out those Flipgrid videos at an awards ceremony or something, or a graduation. You know, that would be really cool to do. And certainly you could do auditions and tryouts for chorus, or have them try out for drama, doing something remotely or virtually. There's just so many things that you can do with Flipgrid. And because of that, I am not surprised that a tool like Flipgrid makes it not only through the entire bracket, but makes it here to the final. If you're using Flipgrid in other ways, when you're done listening, reach out, share your ideas. Go to chrisnessy.com/Flipgrid even, and submit something for Just Give It a Try, and share how you are using and leveraging Flipgrid, or do it on Twitter, or let me know on Instagram. Again, it's all about community here, and that's what I like to see and hear. Now let's shift gears, and obviously the other finalist in the House of EdTech Final Four this year is EdPuzzle. So let's talk about some ways that we can use EdPuzzle in our elementary schools. And first, if you're not familiar with EdPuzzle, it allows you to take video content on YouTube, or they also got content on their website, and you can make the videos interactive. So for example, as a high school social studies teacher, I can find, say, a video on the beginning of World War I, and throughout that video, let's say it's a 10-minute video, at different points in the video, I can put checks for understanding and add questions, whether they're multiple choice or open-ended, and as students watch the video, they have to answer the questions. And you can configure this in a couple of ways. You can allow the students to watch the video and answer the questions as they go, and they can kind of skip and scrub the video. Or what I like to do is, as they're watching the video, at, let's say, the 1 minute mark, there's a question. They've got to answer that question before they can continue watching the video. Or it allows them to rewind the video and then get the information again. So it's a really great way to flip learning. And again, here in the spring of 2020, it's a great way to still provide content and engage your students, not just saying watch a video, answer a question, and they just don't really watch the video, but they just try to find the answer to the question. That's kind of the same reason I don't use the textbook and assign questions at the end of a section, because they just look at the questions and they just go back and they try to find the answers, and they don't really read everything else. So this is a way to kind of combat that. So what can we do at the elementary level with EdPuzzle? You could bring story time to life. You could type in something like storyline online in EdPuzzle search bar, and you will get access to some amazing children's books read by celebrities. The quality is amazing, with animated illustrations to keep your kids entertained, and you won't mind watching your favorite celebrities read to your students. Really cool. You could also set up a station rotation. Again, in your classroom, for example, set up one station with tablets or laptops to watch EdPuzzle videos, one with a project to work on, one with you where they're able to get personalized attention from you, the teacher, and one for reading. Every 10 minutes, have your students rotate to a new station. That way, they won't be getting too much screen time, and everyone will have a chance to use the technology. You could also use something like live mode. Here, you could project the video on screen in front of the whole class, and while students answer the questions on their own devices, or they're in small groups or with partners, so they don't have to be on their own device to watch the video, you could do whole class instruction. And that's a really cool feature that I was not aware of until I was digging my heels in to prepare this episode. Now, what can you do with EdPuzzle at the secondary level? Here are some benefits of using interactive video lessons in a high school. Number 1, videos are a great way for students to review for assessments. Number 2, using open-ended questions on your videos gives you an understanding of what may be confusing for students. Again, if you just give multiple choice, that's quickly Googleable. The right answer is there. An open-ended question makes them think. And number 3, you can share student progress or great responses to boost self-esteem and engage with your students. So again, it's an opportunity to get them engaged. And I know from talking with teachers in my school, maybe you have similar conversations, but it's really tough to get students' attention today when we're competing with cell phones and Netflix and whatever popular game is out there. How are we engaging our students? So if you're finding great video content, EdPuzzle would be a great way to engage them. Now, not all students have access to technology. So how do we work around this? You could encourage your students, 1, to use their own smartphones to watch videos. You could create stations, again, like elementary school, create stations in class where students can watch the videos. And again, even if you have a limited number of devices, this is a great way to still get kids using technology and consuming the content that you want them to consume. You might also consider helping students watch videos in the library, maybe before class, after class, during lunch. So if technology is an issue in your school, maybe these are a couple of ways that you can get your kids doing it. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't also talk about EdPuzzle at the collegiate level, which is where I really get a lot of miles out of EdPuzzle. So I don't do written discussion boards. At Rutgers, when I took over the classes that I teach, they all had weekly discussions, and I don't know about you, but I only read at one speed. And the first time I did written discussion boards, I configured the discussion board to do the following. Don't show students what other students say until that student makes their post. But it was amazing how, even then, I would still read the same response 40 different times. Even though students couldn't see it, I'd still see basically the same response. And I don't know about you, but written discussion boards, they're so impersonal. You really don't get a sense of who your students are, and the discussion that takes place isn't really authentic when kids are replying to other people's discussion board posts. But Flipgrid, audio, video, emojis and stickers, which is cool, but not important. But the idea of having my students be able to see each other and respond to each other, and I can hear their voices and see their faces, that's way more powerful when it comes to making connections and building a good rapport, and then asking your students to learn and buy in to the material. And the nice thing is, I can speed up the videos, so I don't have to watch it at 1x. I can watch Flipgrid responses at like 1.5. So I can consume what I have to do much quicker than if I had to read it. And as a side note, that's also why I use Voxer for some discussions, because I can listen much faster than I can read. So there you have it. That's our 2020 EdTech Final Four. Again, I want to thank you for taking time throughout the month of March to vote each week, and I look forward to whatever the House of EdTech Final Four holds in 2021. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I really like what I did here, and I hope that if you are not currently using Flipgrid or EdPuzzle, that maybe this inspires you with some of the things I shared and some of the suggestions, that you make it a part of what you do. If not, maybe there's somebody who you work with who could certainly find value in these things, and I hope that you share the 154th episode of this podcast with somebody who you want to see be successful in the classroom. And before we wrap up this episode, it's been a few since I did a House of EdTech VIP, so to make it up to you, I've got 2 House of EdTech VIPs for you in this episode. So first, I would like to shout out Jeremy Heiler. He is at Jeremy B. Baller on Twitter. His website is jeremyheiler40, that's the number 40.com. And Jeremy is a middle school language arts and science teacher in Michigan who enjoys working with middle school students in finding their voice in writing and helping them get through this thing called life. I am with you, Jeremy. That's kind of why I got into teaching as well. Jeremy also loves learning about new media to incorporate in his classroom, and he believes, quote, "The classroom is not about us as teachers, it is about our students and what they want," end quote. Make sure you connect with Jeremy. He is our first House of EdTech VIP for this episode. Again, at Jeremy B. Baller on Twitter. And our second House of EdTech VIP for this episode is Miss Steph. She is at Miss Steph Teacher on Twitter. That's MSSTEPHTEACHER. Her website is missstephteacher.blogspot.com. That'll be in the show notes. And Stephanie has been teaching primary school since January 2010 with experience in grades K through 6. Stephanie is passionate about teaching, and she believes that innovative and interactive lessons help engage student participation, and differentiated instruction meets the needs of all students. In June 2014, Steph decided to take an adventure, and she moved her life to Australia, where she's been teaching ever since. So make sure you connect with Stephanie. Also, the number 2 House of EdTech VIP. The links to Jeremy and Stephanie's information will be in the show notes out at chrisnessy.com/154. And congratulations to both of you. You are House of EdTech VIPs. Thank you for checking out this episode of the House of EdTech, and again, making this podcast part of your anytime, anywhere professional development. This has been the 2020 House of EdTech Final Four. I'd love you to keep the conversation going. I love connecting with you and hearing your thoughts on what I share in these episodes. For this one, go out to chrisnessy.com/154, or you can go to chrisnessy.com/feedback, and you can connect with me in many ways to share your thoughts and ideas. Now, if you enjoy the House of Ed Tech overall, I'd like you to do something. And I say this every episode. Go tell somebody else about the podcast. If you tell somebody about a podcast you love, that will help it spread. Spread. And that's what I want this podcast to do, because I believe it will be valuable for so many in education. The other thing that you can do to support the show is you might consider becoming an Awesome Supporter. The Awesome Supporter program is powered by Patreon, and that allows you, as a consumer of content, to support me, a creator of content you appreciate. Many thanks to all of my awesome supporters, without whom this podcast would not be possible. So, shout-outs for Anthony Arnaud of the New Teacher podcast. Find that at newteacher.org. Eric Kurtz, you might have heard of him. He's the man behind Control-Alt-Achieve. Go check it out at control-alt-achieve.com. Dan Gallagher, check out his musings at gallaghertech.edublogs.org. Carlos Garza, aka Mr. G, he is from the Aced Tech podcast, which you can find at aced.tech. Shout out to Peggy George at pgeorge on Twitter. Jen Giffen, co-host of Shooks and Giff the podcast. You can find her great show out at shooksandgiff.com. Jeff Herb, my longest running supporter. Connect with Jeff on Twitter at Jeff Herb. Mike Messner, I miss you, man. We haven't talked in a while. So personal shout out to Mike. Reach out. I want to chat with you. You can connect with him at TeacherMike72 on Twitter. And JP Presevento, he is not co-host. What am I doing here? He is the host of the Bits and Bytes of Education podcast at jpprez.com. And he also has the podcast he does in his district, which connect with JP if you are into PR for school districts. He's got the show for you. And last but not least, Kyle Wilcox, Level Up EdTech on Twitter. If you want to be awesome, go to chrisnessy.com/awesome. The next episode of the podcast is going to be number 155, and that comes your way on April 19th, 2020. Preliminary shout out to my dad, because that's his birthday. Until next time, thanks for learning with me, and remember, using technology isn't difficult. Now go give it a try. So I just realized I did something different here at the end of the episode, where I told you that using technology isn't difficult. Now go give it a try. Do you think that's better than using technology isn't difficult, just give it a try? Let me know your thoughts on Twitter, at Mr. Nessie. I'll see you next time.